Welcome to In Her Voice. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am passionate about helping women live authentically by listening to their inner voice. Get ready to be inspired by women of all walks of life that have set aside their should-bes and not good enoughs and are standing in their true voice, the voice of wisdom that each and every one of us has inside. Hey there, you guys. This is Kelly, and I am so glad that you decided to press play today. You are not going to regret it. I'm sure of that. Today's podcast is sponsored by Studio Sweden. Studio Sweden is a lifestyle brand that makes premium headphones with studio quality sound and a classic Scandinavian design. These are way more than just headphones. They are like a gorgeous accessory and one that makes you feel like you are premium quality. And you know what? You are. So check them out. Click on over to kellycovert.com/studio, or you can just check out the link right in your podcast app. So let's get to today's guest. Her name is Jaclyn Mellone, and we are talking about how your inner mean girl is holding you back. Yeah, you heard me right. She's in there, you know it, and most likely she's not doing you any favors. Just saying. I really love this conversation because we dig into the importance of mindset and share some really practical ways you can begin to change your stories. So let me tell you a little bit about Jaclyn. Jaclyn Mellone is a mindset and marketing mentor, speaker, and co-hostess of the All Up in Your Lady Business podcast. She helps passionate, creative entrepreneurs channel their zone of genius, tackle their inner mean girls, and build know, love, and trust with themselves and their tribe. When she's not helping entrepreneurs create their own versions of success from the inside out, you can find Jaclyn spending time with her husband, Chris, their two adorable children, Eleanor and Marshall, or being lounged on by their fur child, Louie, most likely in a sea of naked Barbies and dismantled Lego sets. Oh my gosh, I love her. She's so real, you guys. I just felt like joy was showering upon me the whole time that I was with her. So if you find yourself nodding or thinking, yes, that is what I needed to hear today, and trust me, there's so much goodness in this episode, I would just ask that you share this episode with a friend. That's how we grow in her voice together. And I'm so thankful to you for helping me with that. So let's get right to my chat with Jaclyn Mellone. Jaclyn Mellone, I am so excited to welcome you to In Her Voice. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and I'm really excited today because we're going to dive into a really favorite topic of mine, and that's how our inner critic holds us back. And I think that there are a lot of starting points that we could begin with, but I think what I would really love for you to start with is maybe sharing a story with us about a time, recent or not so recent, where you allowed your inner critic to hold you back, and then how you sort of pulled yourself out of that.
Ooh, all right. Well, where do I even begin? Right. There's so many. But one that I think is really good, because from the outside, I don't think many people would have seen this, right? But in retrospect and looking back, I was really able to see how much I was holding myself back. So when I first started my business, I joke like I was in like witness protection program or something. I didn't want anyone to know my name. I had a company name, and I was almost like hiding behind the company name, right? And I would join Facebook groups, and I would immediately go into my settings and like delete it from my feed, like afraid that someone on Facebook was going to see that I was like joining a Facebook group for something.
Oh, so interesting.
Like the psychology of this was so, I was still working for the family business, and I wasn't ready to be out there with my current friends and family that I was starting a business online. So I was going to pretty extreme lengths to hide this. But in the business, so I started on Instagram. I grew an Instagram following, and a few months later, I decided to launch a membership site. Now, where this whole inner critic was really holding me back is that I was really afraid to take that leadership role in my own business. So here I was running a business, afraid to tell people about it, right? But I had followers, but they didn't know who I was. And then I'm launching a membership, and the membership is all about bringing people together and about having guest experts. And I actually, at the time, had my coach coming into the membership and doing coaching calls with me in that paid community. And I was afraid to be that leader, right? Like I was in my own head of like, who, no one's going to pay to have me coach them, right? Or people aren't going to join this because I'm the one leading it. And I really took a back seat to my own business, which is so bizarre, right? So in some ways people are like, wow, you launched this membership and you're doing all these things. I was doing things, right? But it took me a few months before I ended up doing those coaching calls on my own. And I remember the first month that it happened, I was like, ooh, I need to find someone else to bring on the coaching calls with me. And I'm like, wait a second. No, I don't. I can lead the coaching calls in my own membership, don't you think? And I was terrified that everyone was going to leave, and they didn't. And it grew from there and took off. But that was such a pivotal moment because I'd realized like, wow, why didn't I think I could just do this? Why did I think I needed to fluff up this program with all these extra guest experts and coaching people? Because I was afraid to really step into that role fully.
Yeah, so let's dig into that a little bit because I'm really curious, and I'm sure that at the time you didn't know the answers to the question I'm about to ask you, but now looking back, I figure that you probably have more insight into this. So why do you think that you didn't want like any of your friends and family to know that you were starting a business?
I know, right? Oh, so many different reasons. I think part of it was that I didn't know if it was going to work or not, right? And I was afraid. I was afraid to fail. I was afraid to, I had already left I worked, at the time I worked for the family business, and I had helped my dad start his business in 2004. Then I left and did marketing actually for a bunch of online companies for a number of years in between. And then I had just the year before gone back and worked for my dad. So part of it was like, ooh, am I going to leave again? I need to be really certain. And if I'm doing this other thing, what are people going to think? I would really downplay it in conversations with my close family. And I was just so afraid of that judgment or failure or needing to have it all figured out. I didn't have it all figured out, right? And I felt like if I was going to be telling people about it, that I needed to have it all figured out.
Yeah. Well, and I think we can all relate to that. Like all of that, wanting people to think the right things of us and not wanting to fail and not wanting to be an embarrassment or have to go back on what we said we were going to do. And I think that it's really interesting that all of those stories, right? Those are stories that we tell ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so how do we begin to first recognize that? Because I think that there are some stories that we tell ourselves still that we don't recognize as that, it's just another way that fear is popping up in our lives. So how do we begin that process of making ourselves aware and then starting to shift the stories that we tell?
Absolutely. And I love how you talk about that too with the stories, because that's really what it is, right? Is that we're telling ourselves something is the way it is, and that's not necessarily the way it has to be. It's just the way that we're seeing it, and we're so trained to see it through that certain lens. So there's a bunch of different ways to do this, but I think it's really building self-awareness that's going to unlock a lot of the answers for you. And probably the easiest and I'll say cheapest way to do that is journaling and really starting to get those thoughts out of your head and onto paper so you can see them and look at them through a different, things feel different. They feel heavier. They feel bigger when they're in our head. So if we're able to get them out, we're able to look at it with a little bit more of an analytical brain and kind of take ourselves out of the equation and be like, why am I feeling like that? Why do I think that is the way it is? And start challenging ourselves to look beyond and to look bigger and think in a different way or in a bigger way.
I love that. And I think one thing that I do to help myself with that own self-awareness, because I think that you'll agree with me on this, Jaclyn, I really want all of our listeners to hear what I'm about to say. This is a process that you will always be working on.
Always.
Right? There's always stuff that pops up. And so when Jaclyn and I talk about doing the work, we are in the process of doing the work right now, just like you are in the process of doing the work wherever it is that you're starting. But one of the things that I say, just like you pointed out, is I will actually say, if I'm talking like to a person, well, the story that I'm telling myself is, and I find that to be very powerful, because just shifting my own language that I use to describe a situation or to describe a circumstance or to describe the emotion or fear or whatever that I'm feeling has that like instantaneous perspective shift of, oh, right, I'm telling myself that, but I don't necessarily have to believe it.
Exactly.
So, what is something that you're working on right now, if you don't mind sharing that with us? Do you have any sort of these stories that now that you've moved past the big one that you shared about having your own business, once you sort of stepped into that, was there other stuff that came up for you?
Oh, there's probably 10 things a day. And this is why I feel like, we're called to do certain things in life. And I feel like this is why even though I have a strong marketing background, and that's really what I work with clients and what they primarily come to me for, this is why I roll up the mindset piece into it, because I identify so much with this myself that it allows me, and I've done so much work with it, that it allows me to have that deep understanding of clients with it, because I'm living it too, right? So all different things of, someone else is doing something better, or it's been done before. Who am I to do something different? Or how many times am I going to pivot? Are people going to think I'm crazy? all different things come up. I've had, how many different thoughts on this.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that you talk about on your website, I was going through some of the blogs. I love doing that. That's one of my favorite things before an interview, because it really gives me a lot of insight into you and your life. But one of the things you talk about is how fear rarely shows up as being afraid.
Yes.
So can you talk about the different ways that fear can show up in our lives? Because I think that for someone who doesn't think of it that way, they may not realize all of the things that are fear.
Exactly. And that's where that self-awareness piece comes in big time. But some of the things I tend to look out for are not having enough time for something. If you always feel like, I don't have enough time, I'm really busy. If you find there's something that you're procrastinating on, especially. Or one thing, and this happens to me every single time I launch something, and I've come to channel it, but I've realized that it's really a form of self-sabotage, right? And I have to be careful with it. And it's whenever I'm launching and I need to be like pressure's on, right? I need to be showing up fully. That's when I start getting ideas on something completely unrelated, and this rush of creativity that like could completely distract me. And I've come to realize okay, every time I'm under pressure, I get these like creative bursts that are completely a distraction. Hey, it might be good information. It might not be, right? I document that. I get those ideas on paper, but I have to pull myself back in and stay focused. But a lot of these, so sometimes it's coming up, and I think we both use the term inner mean girl and saying those things of like, who are you to do this? Or you're not the best one and all that stuff. But sometimes it is coming up in these other ways of like being too busy or procrastinating or having too many creative ideas and things like that.
Yeah, totally. I'm like that too. I always have this fear, and this is a scarcity fear, that if I don't get the idea now, it's going to go away or something like that. And so I write everything down. My listeners know I'm a huge journaler also. And I always have about 4 notebooks going at a time. But when you start to recognize the challenges you have, then you can start to create solutions to help you get your head around those. So you realize, I have all of this creative energy. Let me write that idea down and know that I can come back to it whenever I need to.
Absolutely.
So speaking of that inner critic, that inner mean girl, and who I know that all of us know her well and can hear her voice clearly and loudly, probably every day. Can you share with us some of your own practices that you do on a daily basis or periodically to really help you keep her voice in check?
Sure. So there's a number of things I do. And I think one thing that really shifts the whole way I feel in general is taking time, even if it's only 5 minutes, to meditate every day and to give myself that chance to really be in touch with my inner voice and not that inner critic, right? Because if I'm more in touch with that side of my brain, it's going to help me tune out the other more negative voices, right? So that taking that time to clear my head really just is like the thing that shifts everything. But outside of that, I've done a lot of work in terms of really recreating my own self-image and helping myself to step into that role. And sometimes that's journaling, sometimes that's visualizing. And we have these ways we see ourselves, right? These stories we tell, and sometimes they're conscious and sometimes they're subconscious, where we had something that happened maybe early on in our life that we're not even consciously thinking about, but it's holding us back from really showing up in the way that we're meant to show up. And by breaking through this a little bit and really figuring out who it is that we are, that we know we're meant to be, whether we feel like we're that person in the moment or not, and visualizing myself in that role and journaling on that really helps me to step in and show up as that leader.
Hey, you guys, I just wanted to pop in really quick right here. I totally love what Jaclyn is saying about embodying who it is that we want to be. And I have a funny little story about that I wanted to tell you really quick. I really want to be a podcaster who's sharing products that I love with my audience because I love you and I think you'll like the things that I love. So I started writing that down every single day. And this is so crazy, you guys. It wasn't 3 or 4 weeks after I had been writing that down, I got emailed by this week's sponsor, Studio Sweden, and they asked me if I would be interested in having them as a sponsor of the show. They sent me some headphones so I could try them, and I totally fell in love with them. It's just so cool to me how a lot of times what we need to do is we need to believe it, then we will see it. I really want to tell you really quick about these gorgeous headphones. And you think to yourself, can headphones really be gorgeous? Yes. I have the white and rose gold Vasa, and they are just so pretty. Every time I put them on, I feel like I'm wearing a piece of jewelry. The things that I listen to through them matter to me. I'm listening to other people's voices. I'm listening to music that inspires me. I want to listen to that in a way that is meaningful and in a way that shows myself that I matter. And so it's a simple thing, but it makes a really big difference. You can help me out by checking out this week's sponsor, Studio Sweden. You can go to kellycovert.com/studio. That's SUDIO. You can see all of their products. Buy one for yourself, buy one for some people that you love. And in doing so, you're also supporting me and In Her Voice. Once again, the link is kellycovert.com/studio. And if you use the code VOICE15, you get 15% off of your order. Now let's get back to our interview with Jaclyn. I love that idea of recreating our own self-image. So can you tell us something that you had to shift in order to do that?
So a couple of things. And one for me is, so I have 2 small children. I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old.
God bless you. Mine are older, so I remember those days well.
It's a blur, right? And I've always known this crazy, right? I like to say the juggle is real. But I launched my business the same week I found out that I was pregnant. So it's just been a blur this past couple of years. But with that, there's a lot of situations where I will have the kids and they're pulling on me and they're crying and it's like, okay, here's a snack and here's the nanny and like close the door kind of thing. And then I need to show up as the best version of myself on video. And sometimes there's like a 60-second window here, right? So, and I like to use this example because it's kind of extreme. And there's that role that I play as a mom that's who I am, right? And I don't have to think about how I'm showing up as a mom, right? You just do it. Your kids are there. They bring that out of you. And there's certain environmental or social cues that kind of trigger me to be in that role. Whereas closing a door and turning on a camera or turning on a microphone, sometimes it's hard to like go from that one role to another, right? So really getting intentional about who do I need to show up as for my clients, for my audience, and what like attributes of my own personality do I need to highlight, or do I get compliments on a lot and want to accentuate on purpose because I know people already like that about me, you know? And really plugging into that and kind of combining that with the self-image piece to really kind of let myself like turn on that light switch and go from like crazy mom mode to, Jaclyn, the entrepreneur mode. Right. So certain things like that allow me to plug into that because we're not, especially in online business, right? We're not walking into a boardroom and wearing, a suit or something along those lines. We don't have like the clothes or the environment that's going to usually trigger us to show up in the way, like we would for a certain way if we were going to Thanksgiving dinner with our family or a night out with our husbands, right? Like we show up in different ways in different situations. And especially in online business, we don't have those other cues that help us show up in that way. So I really like to do it intentionally through this process so I can show up as my best.
Well, and this is so interesting because I think that you're exactly right. Like those cues, like, getting your power suit on for a big meeting, if you work in the corporate world, that's going to allow you to get into that mindset. But if you don't have those cues, you have to do that inner work in order to be able to do that. And I think what's really interesting about that is even if you aren't an entrepreneur, even if you don't have an online business, accessing that inner work and being able to do that quickly and, like you say, accessing and showing up as the person that you can be is really great work to be doing regardless of your job.
Absolutely.
Well, and so digging into that piece a little bit more, was there anything as you recreated your self-image? Okay, so first of all, the first image that came to my mind as you described this was like my mom when I was growing up. She would be like screaming at us, and then the phone would ring and she'd be like, hello. And I think that all mothers have clearly we have this power within us, right, that we can do that. But the other thing that I was wondering about as you said that was there part of you that you had to release? Was there part of who you thought you were that you had to let go?
Ooh. It was subconscious, but yes, and through my own journey, I've had things come up where I tend to block out a lot of things. And I actually used to think that this was a strength. I was really proud of this. So it's interesting on the personal development path, right, where I would pride myself on the ability to rise above anything. And to really be that strength, even in times of total uncertainty or chaos or where I was terrified on the inside, I prided myself on that ability. And through going through all of this, I realized I can't just shove it all down forever, right? So I've really had to crack myself open and allow myself to really be in touch with emotions I never even knew I had. And that's allowed me to really channel strength that I never even knew existed, honestly.
Oh, well, that's really deep work there. And I think that if there's anybody else here that is a stuffer, if you're listening and you stuff it down.
Former stuffer.
Right? Recovering
Stuffers
stuffer.
Anonymous, yes.
That allowing yourself to feel the emotions can be terrifying.
Yes.
Can be really, really hard. So what did you do to help yourself through that process?
So finding time for quiet was so important. And sometimes, especially when, so growing the business, just, to illustrate, my son is 14 months old now, but I had him home with me almost full time until 10 months. So it's only the past few months that I've had a lot of this dedicated work time. So finding that like even a half hour alone and in peace and quiet where I wasn't working was really hard at certain points during this year, but I really had to make it a priority because I knew it was to give myself that time to journal, time to cry, time to let it all out and just be present with it. I've also had the blessing of being able to work with an amazing coach that has guided me through a lot of this. And I think that's where, I love being able to help other people with that. And I love having my own coach to help me on that journey too.
Yeah, and I think that this is so critical for all of you guys who are listening to hear this. Coaches have coaches.
Of course.
and we all need that support. We all need that structure, and we all need someone sometimes holding our hand, sometimes saying this is the tool that you should try right now, sometimes just encouraging us to stay into the work, to do it. And we don't have to do it all by ourselves.
Yes. And it's funny for me because sometimes I'll be journaling, I'll be thinking on something or be, meditating on something. And then a month will go by and I'll wake up in the middle of the night and just have this rush of emotion over something that happened in like 5th grade. that I hadn't thought of since, that comes back to me with like complete clarity. And I can see how it ties into maybe something going on in my present situation, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes we want, and I'm not type A, but I have type A tendencies where I want to control things like, firstborn, you want to control it all, run it all. And sometimes you just like want to like get it all out and figure it out in one like journaling session or one coaching session. And that's just not how it works. So being able to let go of that control and let it come when it comes is something that I've really had to embrace. And once I was able to really benefit from.
Oh, I love that. And it's also this idea that even though you think that you've worked through something, it may come up again in a different way or show up in a different area of your life. And be sort of allowing that, just being like, okay, here it is again. This is another opportunity for me to practice. This is another opportunity for me to dig deeper into why I still hold on to this fear or this emotion. Yes. I had a really interesting experience just the other day. My youngest son just started middle school. Mm-hmm. 6th grade, I know. And he had student orientation. And so I took him there, and it was so interesting because as I sat there on the hard bleachers, like watching all of these kids like eye each other, and they know, some of them know each other, but not all of them know each other. And you could kind of pick out the kids who, like are the popular kids and the kids who are maybe a little bit more nervous or whatever. And I had all of those feelings come up in myself. Wow. Like I could remember that feeling, that fear of, am I going to fit in? And what I realized too is I felt that for my son. Like I was thinking to myself, like, what could I do to help him fit in more? And then I realized that's not my job, and that's me tapping into those emotions that I had at that age. But it's just another way that we can work through it and understand, again, like how our inner critic works, how our inner critic shows up. Because I know my inner critic listened very carefully to what happened to me in middle school. And a lot of those things come up still. Yes. And so it always, just like you said, practicing that self-awareness so we can understand when we're going through it.
Yes. And so often I would find as a, recovering stuffer, right, that any of those feelings that would pop up would be inconvenient. And now I really try to show gratitude to those and really try to dig deeper and see why is this coming up now, right? Because I can usually tie it to something, and that really allows me to release it and not just feel that pressure of stuffing it down.
Yeah. And I so love what you're saying too about having a daily practice. And I actually just did a solo episode 39, for those of you guys who are listening, if you want to go back and listen. But it was really on this idea of how all self-care is not created equal. Ooh. And so for me, like, I love taking nice long hot baths, and I'll give myself an hour to read. But during the summer, I really got away from my daily practice of stillness because it was hard. I wasn't in the routine and my kids were around, and it was just more challenging. And I paid the price for it. And it really helped me realize that we have to identify what forms of self-care for ourselves are non-negotiables. So for you, your 5 minutes of journaling. For me, that 15 to 45 minute quiet time in the morning without my kids around me, or whatever that is. And it can look different for everyone, right?
Absolutely. And as we evolve, it probably will evolve too, right? Like, I say 5-minute meditation because I know a lot of times that's all I can get in. So I don't set that expectation for myself of a half hour like I did when I first started and would do it once a month because I never had the time, right?
Yeah.
So as seasons shift, and I'm already looking forward to next week, preschool starting and having a couple extra hours in my week as a result of it, and knowing that I'll have a little bit more time for myself and my business with that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and it's so important. And I'm so glad that you shared that, because I want to nail this point home with my listeners. You have to be taking care of yourself in order to be able to work through this stuff, in order to show up as you know you really can.
Yes. Tony Robbins has a great quote that I'll totally butcher because I'm wonderful at that. But it's something along the lines of, like, you need to take at least 10 minutes for yourself every day. And if you don't have 10 minutes, you need an hour.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I think you did a good job at it.
Something like that.
Yeah. No, that's truth. That is truth right there. So, Jaclyn, why don't you let all of my listeners know how they can connect with you if they want to learn more about you, if they want to listen to your podcast and all of that fun stuff?
All right. So my podcast is All Up in Your Lady Business. So wherever you're listening now, you can head on over there and find myself and my co-hostess, Jessica Stansberry, there. And then my website is jaclynmellone.com. And I have a Facebook group called We Are the Voice Revolution, and I'd love to connect with you on any of those ways.
Excellent. And I will link to all of those in the show notes for this episode. So you can head on over to kellycovert.com and click on the podcast tab, and it will be right there. So, Jaclyn, I have one more question for you today as we wind things up. And I would love to know from you, what is your inner voice, your place of wisdom, asking of you in your life right now?
Oh, I love how you asked this question. And right now it's really to be open to the unexpected. I mentioned earlier wanting to control everything and have that plan and know exactly how it's all going to work out. But I'm really setting my eyes on things that might be unexpected and being open to that and not trying to plan it all out to a T, and really just shifting the way I look at things and allowing myself to really think bigger and expand in that way.
I love that. It's really opening up to what the universe has in store for you instead of feeling like you have to plan everything out.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And I think as mothers, we tend to be planners. So it's sort of in our nature to be that way. So I wish you well in your effort to be open. And I love that. And I think that's a practice that we could all stand to do more of.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being here today. I just want to take a moment to honor and acknowledge you. I'm really feeling in your voice, I'm not in the room with you, but in your voice, this energy of deep joy. And I'm so thankful for that. Like I've just been smiling the whole time that we've been talking, and that joy is really coming through. And I hope that my listeners can feel that too. And I know that they will. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your joy and your voice with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. That was now my eyes are tearing.
Crying's allowed. Thanks so much, Jaclyn. I told you were going to love her, right? Isn't she just fantastic? And I love what she said. I think my favorite part was about recreating your own self-image. Listen, you guys, we don't have to be stuck or feel stuck being the same person we've always been. We don't have to dig into that if we don't want to. You can choose in each moment who you are going to be. And that is up to you. Only you. You're the one who gets to decide. And it may feel oftentimes like other people are deciding for you, but that's actually not true. So when you start doing this work, when you start digging in, when you start spending the time in meditation or in journaling or whatever that looks like for you, that's when you start to understand who it is you really are, not who it is you think you should be or who it is everyone else wants you to be, but who you actually are. So journaling is a great way to do this. Jaclyn spoke of it, and you guys know me. I am like the journal queen. And guess what? I have a new 5 days of journaling coming up. Yes, just next week, starting on November 28th, that's 2017. We are going to be doing a live 5 days of journaling for visionary women. You heard that right. And how do you know if you're a visionary? Well, if you have a big vision, if you are feeling a pull to make a difference in 2018, to do something big, to finally heed that calling, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? That feeling that you were made for something great. That is what a visionary is. If you feel that, you are a visionary. And I created this 5 days of journaling for you. And what we're going to be doing together each day for 5 days is journaling on prompts that are going to help us get clear on what our inner voice is saying, get clear on a plan for 2018 of action, of what that's going to look like. We're going to get confident that what our inner voice is telling us is the right thing, and we're going to get courageous to go out there and make a difference in 2018. So this starts November 28th. All you have to do is sign up with your email. You'll get an email each morning, and then I'll be doing a live teaching and Q&A every single day for the 5 days. So to sign up, just head on over to kellycovert.com/journal. Put in your name and email, and you are good to go because it is 100% free. And I really hope that you listen to that pull of your inner voice. This is for you. This is for you. kellycovert.com/journal, or you can just click the link right in your podcast app. As always, I want to remind you that you are in this world for a reason. You were put here for a reason. We need you for exactly what you can do and for exactly who you are, because you are worthy.